Okay, so next up is the intensive phase right here. Now, what you're probably going to see after the extensive phase is you're going to see a time to exhaustion. At this point right over here, you're going to see it right around an hour to 45 minutes, somewhere in there. Typically, for some of the outliers, you might see an hour and a half, but for anything less than 35 minutes, you're typically not spending enough time in that extensive phase. But let's pretend in this case we have achieved that. We have a time to exhaustion of about an hour and 3 minutes, which is pretty good. This is a bike one. For the run, it's going to be the exact same thing, and just a little bit different. Like we talked about before, you're going to see some shallower curves in here, but it's the same principles, the same rules apply. So when I'm talking about it here, just envision that happening for the runs. So back to this one right here. Back to our intensive phase focus over here. Typically, we're going to have about 4 weeks over here. For some athletes, desperately needing to improve that FTP in order to achieve some success, we might spend another extra block in that extensive phase so we can have another one in this intensive phase right in here. But overdoing it typically will not lead to great results in the end. You might have some initial success and then some crashing later on, which is why we don't spend a whole lot of time in here, and why you'll also see that it's balanced with a lot of other easier workouts. So don't overdo those easier workouts, because the goal is for you to crush these longer and more intense ones. And like we talked about before, this time to exhaustion, where this red arrow is right here, we've already pushed it out to where the theoretical max is going to be for our next couple of phases. You might see a little bit of bump to the right a little bit. Maybe we'll end right in here. But if you're seeing a lot of jumps and you're seeing the time to exhaustion push out to 2 hours right over here, then you know you're kind of not focusing on what you need to focus on over here, because the main goal is this FTP line right here, this area, which is, it's pretty tight right here. But what we're going to focus on in this case, in this athlete's case right here, we're going to be focusing on areas typically right in here, maybe right in here. And what we're doing during this phase right in here is what we are going to try to raise this area up. So back in the old days, we would do things like 3x20, 3x15 if we're feeling really good. And again, what that will do, if we spend that time in that FTP area, we're going to be right at this purple line, right in there. And let's say we do that 3 times, so we're going to end in 45 minutes, right about in there. If you take a couple minutes break here and there, what you're going to be doing is you're not going to be teasing out that FTP line enough, and you will end up somewhere right in there. I know it's a little lower, but I just want to show it right there for a visual example. What we need to be doing at this point, pretty much right in here, is what we need to be bringing that area up. Okay, that's what's going to increase our FTP. That's what's going to make us faster over the course of this time right in here. And we will be doing a total time that's going to end somewhere way over here. But just for this example right in here, we're going to stick here and then we're going to move on to that. So back in those old days, we were not focusing enough time and specific energy in the right ways. And if you didn't have a whole lot of time to train, this would obviously impact your training, and you would, once you reached a certain point, you would stagnate. You might go up, I've reached the pinnacle of my success. Like I just can't get anywhere else in the time that I have for me. And now we know that that is not the case. What we do need to be doing, instead of having a threshold that is based off of a test that is just right in here, right? Typically what we need to be doing is having a test that is somewhere in the hour range right there to give us more of a accurate perception of things. Because if we realistically have a test in this hour range right here, this point right in here, then 20 minutes should be nothing, right? Obviously it's going to hurt a little bit, but 20 minutes is not going to feel the same as it once was. You go all out for 20 minutes and you base everything off of that. It's not going to be as accurate as it should be for some of those longer tests. And what we're doing, we're targeting some of those endurance efforts right in here. So obviously it's going to be a little different for those short course athletes, but for the most part, for everyone, this is what we are doing now. And going back to the whole training of what we are doing specifically, again, we're targeting this area right in here. So you're going to be seeing some of these longer efforts in here. You might see 2 by 30 minutes at that FTP, maybe 101%, somewhere in there, split up by 5 or 6 minutes. It's a heavy workout, and what that's designed to do is get you a ton of time in that FTP area. So once we get, let's go to an hour. Once we get to an hour, instead of being down here, we are now in this area over here. And again, the whole idea is to take this curve and push it up in this phase over here. Now let's get to the real specifics. For this athlete right here, their time to exhaustion is an hour, which means by the end of this phase, they realistically need to have, let's say, an hour and a half of work in one specific workout of FTP stuff. So a 2 or 3 by 30 minutes is not out of the question at that FTP area. But that, again, is on the outer limits of what they should be achieving and racing and doing. If we do the first couple of workouts and we're not recovering well, we're not doing everything in the next couple of workouts that we should be because this workout is too much, we're obviously going to back things down and split up those those intervals for you. But I'm just telling you what should theoretically possible for you to do to drive that curve up. And let's go back to the limits that were achieved back in the old days when no one knew exactly what we were doing. Again, this is all cutting edge stuff. Those limits now, you can see this line, this power duration curve line right in there, right? If we could take that curve and bring it up over here, that is great for us. Again, we are not targeting this area in this phase right in here yet. That'll be next. But right now, again, we're going to design FTP areas, intervals, and things like that all around this curve right here. We now know at the point where you are fatiguing based off of the time and availability and training stressors that you can tolerate right in there. Now we're going to design things based off of that. Here's where it gets cool. So in this case, let's say this athlete does hour time to exhaustion. We're going to have a 45-minute interval right at that FTP. We're going to do that 2 times in his major workout over there. Solid workout. We're going to split it up by, let's say, 10 minutes of easy pedaling, 5 minutes of easy pedaling or running. And after he does the second one, I can almost guarantee you that this curve is going to get pushed up here. It's probably most realistically going to get pushed in this area over here and raised up over there. What is that going to do for you as an athlete? Well, how nice would it be? Let's say that this area right here, this hour and a half area, FTP of 270, let's say that is about a 180 watts over there. How nice would it be at the end of this to know after an hour and a half you can tolerate 220 watts? That is a 40 watt bump at the hour and a half marker right in there. So for those Ironman, half Ironman athletes, half marathon, full marathon, how great would that be to have that increase, that 40 watt increase over there? And again, I just threw 40 watts just out of a hat, so keep in mind it could be more, it could be less, but having the ability to have that extra power over there, that's where speed comes into play. Because this FTP line, again, we're kind of going away from this FTP and what it, like the main markers and what it, the hold that it has on you. So if your event, let's change this to 30, 60, this is all minutes, 90, 120 over here. And let's say this is, what is that, 180? Let's say that's 3 hours over here. Let's say this is a half marathon or a half Ironman person over here. How great would it be to be able to maintain these watts over here instead of down here? And this is where speed comes into play. Because if you can maintain this area over here, and we know that your FTP line is up here, but you can maintain this, I'm going to ask you to maintain that over the course of your race, and that's going to make you 40 watts faster in this unique example, right? That's going to make you 40 watts faster over the amount of time that we know realistically that you can hold. And this is all driven around this phase right in here, okay? So that is the main goal of this phase right here. We're going to increase your ability to tolerate some of those longer durations, those longer power outputs over an extended period of time. And that time to exhaustion phase, extensive phase that we did before this, is the main driver behind this. And without this solid base, you're not going to be able to build up as tall, right? Think of a skyscraper. The phase we did before, what that is doing is that's pushing the base out further to each side. So instead of this skyscraper over here, what we now have is a skyscraper like that. And obviously, the more we can build out in that first phase, the higher the theoretical possibilities we can achieve later on. But if we go back to the original example, right, we can only realistically achieve right up there for a max end speed, that max end power that we can sustain over the course of time. But with that extra base, in this case, we'll call it TTE. Not quite as simple as this, but for this example, it'll work. With this increased TTE, we're going to have the capability to go a lot higher than what we would have in this case. So that is why we did last phase and this phase, and that is why we are doing the intervals that we are doing. You're going to see some longer intervals in here, and that is the main reason for what we are doing. Okay, so it's not all for nothing over here, and I want you to this FTP area, I just talked about it a little bit, that FTP, I want you to keep it in mind, but I want you to realize this FTP, now that we are doing what we're doing here, it's not the end-all be-all anymore. It used to be that is what it is, but now we really know, okay, some athletes may be able to really sustain this area over here. Other athletes, their area is over here. And now we know that. And for the longer course athletes, that's where these metrics come into play a ton. Even for shorter course, I would argue. So this is the intensive phase. I know I kind of rambled on a little bit towards the end, but expect to see intervals kind of in this area with the main goal of driving it up from there. So you should start to see, maybe not an FTP increase over here, but you should start to see a little bit of increases in this area down over here, possibly even over here. So that is the intensive phase in a nutshell. If you have any questions, please reach out to me, and I'd be happy to answer any questions that you do have. All right, talk to you guys later.